Hello, everyone, and welcome to another delightful episode of the Conversations with Coaches podcast. I'm your host, Kevin, and I have already been having a delightful conversation with Orville Ray Wilson. Let me introduce him, and then we'll pick up right where we left off. He's already given me some smiles and some things to think about, and I'm excited to share them with you, or I'm excited for us to share them with you. But first, Orville Ray helps professionals build their businesses by becoming thought leaders, working on writing, stagecraft, and marketing, and with 40 years on the international speaking circuit under his belt. That ain't just whistling Dixie. He knows exactly how to help professionals in creating entertaining, content-rich presentations that effectively grow their businesses. Orville, you've been on before, had a delightful conversation with you then. I'm reminded of how much fun I had last time just by talking with you before I hit record. So welcome back to the podcast, and thanks for being here.
It's an honor and a pleasure, Kevin. Thank you.
So we were spitballing topics to talk about, and you had a few that came to mind, and there was one in particular that I immediately responded to. It's something that it comes up in a number of different ways in a number of kinds of conversations I tend to have, and I want to explore it with you for a little while. We were talking about thinking about how you, as a coach, which means you're a business owner, how you deal with price objections, or when people come to you, or people are a client of yours, or are thinking of becoming a client of yours, and whatever their status is, their excuse that they make, their reason for not staying with you or choosing to hire you as their coach is, well, you're too expensive, or it's too much money right now, or cash flow is kind of a problem. Let's circle back in 3 months, 6 months, whatever. It's some sort of price objection. So let's talk about that a little bit from your perspective. How have you dealt with in the past, and how do you deal with today whenever you encounter a objection like that you're too expensive, or that coaching is too expensive?
Well, the first thing, I wrote the books on guerrilla marketing along with a handful of other people. One of the best-selling books in that series was Guerrilla Selling, and so we have kind of an unconventional approach to sales generally. And one of the things that I always taught people is to recognize that price objections are actually a buying signal. They wouldn't object to your price if they weren't seriously considering your offering. So, I would also advise most coaches that you probably don't charge enough, especially if you're good.
True.
It's not, my fees are pretty high. It's $20,000 a year to work with me. And most clients earn that back in the first 90 days. I had one client who earned that back in 21 days after we started. He had $28,000 in prepaid fees for speeches that he was scheduled to give over the next 6 months. Just
awesome.
A bang. So coaching can have a tremendous impact on your business and a great multiplier effect. But it is kind of an interesting discussion. And it can be really scary for clients. I had a conversation earlier today about a client of a client. And this woman has been with this coach for a while. He took her business from $11 million last year in 21 to over $50 million in 22. And now she's going through a cash flow squeeze and saying, gosh, I really, I can't justify this. It's too expensive. I can't afford it. This woman also works with 2 or 3 other coaches, and has just bought herself a luxury car and been on an expensive vacation. And so the discussion was around how do you get this client to acknowledge the value that you've created together.
Yeah.
And what kind of questions might lead to that. And I suppose my first thought about that would be, you can't lose what you ain't got. One of the most valuable lessons I learned in life was you can't lose what you ain't got. The Dalai Lama says all suffering is the result of attachment. And sometimes we get attached to clients, and when for whatever reason they decide to withdraw from our practice, we tend to take that personally.
Yeah, it's natural.
And we shouldn't. So as part of your regular coaching practice, one of the things that you should do, I think, is at the end of each call is to ask them, well, Kevin, let me summarize this conversation by asking you, what are the most valuable things that you've taken away from this conversation? And how are you going to apply them over the next week or whatever your cadence with them is? That does a number of things. First of all, it anchors the value in the mind of the client. Yeah, that was a really terrific insight that you had about, why I'm having trouble getting my book written. That just, lifted the scales from my eyes or whatever. And having them articulate that verbally it really helps cement the value in their mind. It also gives you feedback about which part of the conversation had the greatest impact for that client. And there's an accountability element because now you're challenging them. Okay, well, let's take this out into the world and make it work. Let's make the change. You change the behavior, make the call. Do the outreach because I'm going to ask you about that next week. And sometimes accountability is the most valuable thing that we can offer a client in those terms. So it's a sensitive area. Try not to rub it. As you said, as you alluded to earlier, this is a deep conversation. What's been your experience with that issue?
It's been fascinating, just both from like a 30,000 foot sort of high concept perspective, and also a brass tacks in the middle of a sales conversation, talking about like how the numbers work and how the value translates between myself and a client. I've been on both sides of that part of the conversation too, and one thing I find that it comes back to frequently, especially in the context of coaching or anything that's even really close to coaching, where there's a lot of present service value in the ongoing relationship. It's not just like you purchased a program, you've got the steps, you got the PDF booklet, and now you're just like running a script. It's like the active relationship between the coach or the guide or the counselor or whoever it happens to be is really where the value rests. But it can be sometimes difficult to understand that in the moment. And also, I think there is I don't want to say a disconnect, but there's sometimes a temptation to consider coaching or anything coaching like as an expense as opposed to an investment. Right. An expense, and again, it's right there in the word when people say you're too expensive or you're too pricey. It's like, well, I understand that there is a monetary value here. Like, it's numbers on a spreadsheet. Sure. It's going to have an effect. But in terms of how you think of it, an expense is something you think of as leaving you. It's like, this costs me this. Investment, there's things going, there's something leaving you, and there's something coming back. An investment, whether it's going to pay off in the short term, medium term, long term, or all of the above, an investment has a different place in people's minds. And getting people to not just understand once, but to kind of internalize that the coaching relationship and the money put towards coaching is an investment in present and future success. Really helps to change the tenor of the conversation, because then I'm not trying to get them to give something up. I'm trying to convince them that they are getting something, or remind them that they are getting something of present and future value. And that's always like, and that can be tricky. And like you acknowledge this too, and I feel like this is important too, and this comes up in all sorts of coaching conversations. There are times where it's the right move for a client to at least temporarily move on from a coach, like a purpose has been served. And there's a time where, I think we need to put this relationship on the back burner, maybe come back around to it. There are times where that's the right decision. And one thing I love about pretty much every coach I speak to, yourself included, is that you understand that there's a season for all things, as they say, as it's sung. And that's an important aspect of this to acknowledge too, I think, is that there are times when it is the right move. Where I'm always I have like a little yellow caution flag is whenever people start talking about expense, where they're objecting based on the price, where you could tell they're making calculations on a spreadsheet as opposed to value judgments about a relationship. And that always reminds me to try to reframe the conversation in a way that's going to serve both of us, whether I'm on the receiving end or I'm on the giving end. And so that's one thing that I think about a lot in this context, is that expense versus investment dichotomy.
Well, even the federal government recognizes that professional development, professional coaching, executive coaching is a legitimate business investment. It's tax deductible. Those are you doing your taxes this time. It's that time of year. So yeah, and it can pay big. I work with subject matter experts who, become influencers and eventually thought leaders. An example is Terry Moore. Terry is an attorney in Minneapolis, and he was attending an advanced storytelling lab that I was teaching, a master class I was teaching for the National Speakers Association, a chapter there where he was a member. And I had talked briefly about the importance of writing a book. And he came up to me as people often do. He says, I've been thinking about writing a book to grow my law practice. I said, okay. Well, what sort of book do you think I should write? I said, well, Terry, you're asking the wrong question. The question to ask is, what sort of clients do you want more of? Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. He says, well, I really like these business divorce cases. Oh, really? Like married couple has a business and they're getting divorced. I said, no, that's a whole nother thing. No, it's more like two guys in college get together and they start up a little business and it grows and it's successful. And, 30 years later, one of them gets caught with his hand in the till, or he's having an affair with the other guy's wife, or these things happen, or one of them wants to retire a boat in Florida, the other guy wants to franchise out and build an empire, and now you've got to unravel the hairball. And these cases they're really interesting, and they're also really lucrative because there's often tens of millions of dollars on the table at stake. And well, that sounds interesting. Do you know enough about business divorce to write a whole book, a 140-page book about it? Oh, yeah, I've been doing this 20 years. And so we did. We worked on this book over a span of about 8 months. This is at the height of we had met just before all the lockdowns kicked in. March of 2020. So we worked through the rest of 2020 on getting the book written. And we, as soon as the book was available, we created a half-day webinar for attorneys based on this book, and applied for and got certification for continuing legal education credit. And then started offering this webinar to bar associations all over the country. If you're an attorney, you have to keep up with your CLUs to maintain your license. And nobody could go anywhere. And so this solved a very real problem in the market. And so he started doing these webinars for bar associations. And he stopped showing up for appointments, and he kind of went dark on me. And finally, back in February of last year, he called to say, gosh, I'm really sorry. I know I should have been in touch, but I've just been, I have to tell you that my 3-year rolling average was about 750,000 take home. This year, it's 1.25 million. So he had added $500,000 take home to his law practice as a direct result. He said, I've got 14 of these business divorce cases. I might play. I'm scrambling to try and keep up.
Yeah.
That's what I would call a best-selling book.
Yeah. Yeah.
Write a book that sells you. And so I'm sure he would argue that that whatever the investment was in his coaching had been a good investment. And I have a shelf full of books and success stories like that from clients that I've worked with. Sometimes they tell me these stories, and I'm sitting there going, "Oh my God, I could raise my feet." I need to start more.
It's true too. It's true. And that's often, I find that so many coaches and entrepreneurs in general, they struggle even before they have their first conversation about it with how to monetarily value their services. It's a very tricky conversation to have with yourself. Right. And then it continues to be a tricky conversation to have with others, because you want to correctly value your contribution
Mhm.
to who you're providing your services to and for, in a way that maintains accessibility to the clientele that you wish to serve. And there's a good push-pull there. And I feel like a good relationship with your pricing is a living relationship. It ought to be a moving target, because the manner in which you provide value and the degree of that value that's provided can change from person to person. And I'm thinking, you reminded me by using a lawyer who was a client as an example of how certain lawyers very frequently take cases pro bono, which essentially means for free. And there are many purposes that serves, but it is an active part of what they see as their contributing value. It's an active expression of their profession and their passion, what they're doing for a living, what they're doing with their life.
And there's Latin, and it literally means for the good.
Exactly. Yeah. And there's a balance there too, with how you, especially as a coach, how your relationship to your price, your monetary cost for your services rendered, programs offered, and guidance as it continues on. And I feel like it's something that, because it's challenging, at least at first blush, it's very challenging. It can stay tricky. A lot of coaches and a lot of entrepreneurs will turn away from having that conversation. They'll just lock their price in. It's kind of like not think about it or not really engage with it. And so I like that we're shining a light on it, because there's a lot of aspects to it that are really important, like how you value your coaching, how your clientele, not just like your general clientele, not just imaginary person X, but your ideal clients, the kind of clients who are in the profession or in the stage of their career or business that you are wanting to serve, that you feel like you have the most to offer to. How does your value translate to them? And the easiest way to figure that out is to talk to them about it, but it's one of the harder conversations to have, isn't it? Or it can be among the harder conversations to have.
Well, a good question there is to ask, well, where do you want to be a year from now? You know, on the 17th of January, 2023, where do you want to be? What do you want to have? What do you want to have more of in your life? What do you want to have less of? What does that look like?
Do you want more money? Do you want more time?
Yeah, exactly. Do you want to travel the world? Do you want to see, do you want to be on, big stages in front of association conferences? Do you want to have, you work part-time and have a small handful of white gloves clients that pay you very well, and you have a nice relaxed life, whatever.
Yeah. So when you get them to spell out the vision of where they're trying to go and work through the math of what that would be worth to them, not only monetarily, but in terms of lifestyle, in terms of time with family, in terms of personal development growth, then I think it's a lot easier to justify your fees. I also believe that if a prospect doesn't stop breathing a little bit when you quote the numbers, maybe you're not charging enough.
Excellent point.
Nothing commits a client like cash. And so if they, one of the clients I coach is an executive coach in Aspen, and his clients fly in, often in their own jet, to meet with him twice a month, and it's $75,000 a year, in full, in advance, non-refundable, no questions asked. And he's very selective about who he takes on.
Yeah.
But he's also had clients who have been with him for 10 years, who have built multi-million-dollar enterprises multiple times over the arc of that work together.
Lovely.
So it's a deep topic.
Yeah, that's a great example, because I feel like that's another thing too that's really important to bring out whenever you're having a conversation, be it with a client or someone for whom you are a client, is that money, that monetary investment is also a commitment. And one thing that is absolutely crucial to coaching having the desired effect is that you show up and do the work. It's not just, you can't phone it in. That's why sometimes you're almost better off pricing things a little higher, because when someone's a little uncomfortable, when someone's butt cheeks tighten up a little bit when they first see your price and then they pay it, you know what they're not going to do? They're not going to come in go off half cocked. They're not going to not pay
Right.
attention. They're not going to metaphorically or literally sit at the back of the class and like be listening to a podcast or, you know, doing something else. They're going to show up. They're going to pay attention because they've already paid money for it. They better pay attention to it. And they're
Right.
going to extract the most value they can. They're going to do the homework. They're going to do the active work, and they're going to invest in the relationship with their time and their attention, because their time and their attention is going to follow their money.
Absolutely. Well, here's a question I like to pose to you again from this conversation I had with a client earlier today. She was asking, well, you know, this woman is going through a cash squeeze. She's expecting a grant from the government, you know, to come through in the next few months, and she's asking if I would let her continue in the program, you know, for free until her, you know, until she has the ability to pay again. So what do you think about, you know, coaching clients for free, you know, either as an over the interim or under particular circumstances or as a trial? Or
I like.
What are your thoughts about that, Kevin?
Yeah, there's a couple of things there I like, because you use two words there, like circumstance and as a trial. I'll start with trial first, because and this is, I mean, one of the, it's maybe not the best example, but I'm going to use it anyway because it's very on point. One of the cardinal tenets of drug dealing is everybody gets the first taste for free. but there's real value in considering it. It's not just, you're not just trying to like chemically addict someone to something, but like there's real value in letting someone get a real entry level experience of what it's going to be like. Let them get a taste, because sometimes they just don't know. It's a lot of reticence that comes with committing to a coach. Can be, I find that it frequently is, I'm not really sure what that's going to look like for me. Like they've never done it before, or maybe they had like a not so satisfying experience. And so sometimes a little taste, whether that's in the form of like a free webinar, or that's some sort of like booklet or worksheet or something that you put together, that's, you know what, just see if you're picking up what I'm putting down, see if we're a good fit, get to know me a little bit. Maybe you've got a YouTube channel where you've got some videos going and they can actually see you in action, or they can like hear you speak or get an idea of what your concepts are. And they're like, oh, okay, I want to learn more. And then maybe there's like, for example, the free chemistry call, the little 20-minute, 30-minute, maybe an hour, where it's just like, you know what, come on, let's just chat a little bit and see if I have something to offer you. That can be an amazing obstacle circumventer, because then a lot of their fears, a lot of their strongest fears are going to be allayed by the fact that they've gotten a taste of what the value they're going to get out of this relationship might look like, and they want to know more, and that want is going to help buoy them past any wallet tightening they might be feeling. The second thing you mentioned, the other one you mentioned, is circumstances. Now I really do feel like there's a case-by-case basis here, because you do have to pay attention for someone who is just, whether through good intentions or not, or poorly formulated intentions or not, are just going to try and take advantage of a situation. And I am someone who tends to err on the side of generosity as I learn to keep an eye out for people who are just looking to take advantage or just looking to cut corners. And so really, that's one of those that I would judge on a case-by-case basis. There are certain clients of mine that they're not going to get a free lunch, because I know, and these are people that I love and respect and admire, but I understand what happens if the circumstances shift in that particular way. And so I'm just not going to let that happen. That's going to damage the relationship for all parties involved if I let us go down that road. So that's a line that I'll hold. There are others where I'm not that I understand their situation more, but I feel like I understand them better and know that if I give them a little bit of slack and let them make ends meet, that they're going to come through on the other end in a way that's actually going to deepen and improve our relationship. Now, I'm making it sound very clear cut just because I'm thinking of like specific examples in mind, but a lot of times it can be very tricky. So I really feel like that's got to be circumstantial. My initial feeling is, don't think about it. Have a conversation about it before you consider giving anything away for free, unless you're just trying to hook somebody on your drugs. And in that case, the first one's free.
Yeah. Well, I'll give anyone an hour just for asking. That's part of what I do. I mean, I have colleagues all over the world in the National Speakers Association. I've been part of that professional group for 40 years. In that little tiny skinny niche, I was an international celebrity And so I get inquiries from colleagues all the time, and I'm delighted to help anybody I can. That's why I'm in this business, is to help people. So if any of your listeners would like to take advantage of my ridiculously generous good nature, just send an email to orvilleray@gmail.com. I'll spell that orvellray@gmail.com, and I'll send you back a link, and we'll get on the calendar, and we'll get some coffee, and we'll talk. I'm very selective about who I take on, and it might be the 2 or 3 sessions before I'll make that commitment. I mean, we talked on the other side about fees and committing and money and all that, but that's also true for us as coaches.
Correct.
You only have so many slots in my practice, and if I'm going to take somebody on for a year, we're going to spend more time talking together than I spend with my wife. Really
it is.
And that's a big commitment, and it's a big risk for us as coaches, because you don't want people who aren't going to do the work, who aren't going to show up, who aren't all in. So I'm very generous on the front end, and then when we both agree that they have gotten deep value from the work together, then we talk about fees, and then and what that structure might look like, and what kind of commitments we're making to each other going forward. Because it's not a transactional relationship. It's working with a coach is perhaps one of the most intimate and life-changing relationships in your business, in your career. It can literally transform your life. Clients who have engaged me, to help them write a book, and we wind up talking about issues with their spouse, or raising kids. I'm nearly 70 now, and I raised 2 happy, successful boys, and so I have a point of view about those things. Or sometimes we wind up talking about fly fishing. I don't know. It can affect many aspects of your life. I had a client comment recently who said to another colleague, Orville helps me in ways that I didn't even know I needed help. And so it's an important investment. It's an important commitment, but it has to be reciprocal. So well, it's been a real pleasure, Kevin. You had some great ideas. It's been a really productive conversation.
Good. Yeah, for me too. I'm so glad to have you back on. It was fantastic. We started with one topic. We ended up covering so much about the coaching relationship and the coaching business, and fly fishing, parenting, public speaking, coffee talk, and everything in between. And I'll go ahead and make sure to spell out correctly your email address in the show notes. If you want to talk to Orville, he has an opening in his practice right now. You should have a conversation with him. You've listened to us talk. You may have heard our previous episode. I'll also put links to his LinkedIn profile. It's fairly well established and active there. And also, is it gorillagroup.com? Is that still a good place to learn more about you? Maybe not connect with you, but to still learn more about you and what you've done?
It's Gorilla, GUERRILLA, as in guerrillawarfare.com. And you can read all about my practice and the work I do at that website.
Excellent.
Thank you, Kevin.
Well, of course. I'll have everything in the show notes. And hey, to the audience, you've heard this episode. You want to learn more about Orville, trust me. Just click the links, go find out more about him. It's great. If you have the privilege, chat with him. Excellent conversationalist. And for us here today, we will talk to you again very soon.